but certainly not right now. Councillor Crum.
No, I think I'll pass on, thanks, Madam Chair. No question at this stage.
Okay, Member Ngamane.
Oh, kia ora. Acknowledging the broader strategic discussion and context and everything that's gone before by the chair, I do have a question. Of course, noting that the housing ratio for Māori is something around 1 to 12, 13, and looking at a goal of 5 over that period of time. I'm interested in what, if any, levers in your report you think have the greatest potential to lift the social and economic well-being of Māori in respect to this.
To the Chair, the issues for Māori are very much the issues for all, but more so. So, as you say, the median house price to income ratio is some 12, possibly 13, compared to 10 for everyone. So, what is already too high for all is massively too high for them. Any steps that can be taken, in my report, I sort of prioritised half a dozen or so that would make the biggest impact to getting 5 by 2030. They relate to things that we're already doing well, things we probably need to do a little bit better, and things that might be we've got to commence. And there are other things undertaken to address Maori housing in particular. I know that the Community Social Policy Division is using my report to really drill. There's a foundation for their work on this. They're looking at it as supplementary tools to help with the additional mountain to climb for Māoridom. They're at a discovery phase at the moment. Would you like me to embellish further on specific levers, or is that I've talked high level?
I mean, I was keen for you to just highlight what you thought were the key ones. If you're saying essentially the levers are generic, whether they're applied to Māori or not, then if that's what you're saying, then that's what you're saying.
To the Chair, that they fairly are generic. There are some that might be not so much about lowering house prices, but enabling households to live within their means.
Look, I'd be interested in you highlighting that.
Okay, so one, for example, for that is, can't remember the number, but relates to increasing the size of smaller dwellings that can be built on a section without needing the full building control consent and the like. Currently it's 10 metres squared, which is quite small. If you're thinking about putting a sleep out for your child or something, you probably want to put something bigger, but then you have to go through the full hurdles. So I suggested raising that perhaps as high as 25 metres squared. That also allow one to perhaps, under certain guidance, to allow kitchens or bathrooms.
26.
26 was that one. I didn't green light it because there's a bit more thinking that needs to go before a recommendation can be made, but it's something I certainly think warrants much closer.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. A very interesting report, a very disturbing report. I just want to ask a question relating to your comment about the efficient use of land, and in particular the assumption that the greater intensification as envisaged with terraced housing and apartments and whatnot will go some way to addressing the issue of affordability. In large parts of my ward, those proposed unitary plans are really actually de facto in operation now, so there's a lot of terraced housing getting built, a lot of apartments getting built. No matter where I go to in the ward, I see the price is actually higher than the Auckland average. So if we go to Hobsonville, terraced housing, it's 849k. Millwater, it's 865k. If you go to apartments in places of Orewa, they're starting at 979k. The cheapest one I could find was a one-bedroom apartment for 600k. So when I look on the ground, as what's actually happening now in the market. The apartments and the terraced housing are not delivering the level of affordability that we assume is going to emerge through the unitary plan. And that's, I don't know what other parts of Auckland like. I've looked all around my ward. There is unaffordable as a standalone houses. What's your take on that?
To the chair, I think that's a really valid question, because I visited Hobsonville in the weekend just been, and it is much more economising on the land that's there, and the prices are still high. So it leads to the question, well, if this was all there was to it, why aren't prices low here? What needs to happen is not just that we have pocket developments of that, because if it's just a very marginal thing, we're not going to change the market price. We need to sort of have a wholesale approach to that. So it's not just in one subdivision, a 20-minute drive away from the city centre. If we can do that wholesale, closer, much more places that are able to do that, then you'll have more houses come online, and we can lower the market prices of houses. Now, that's one part, but then there's a host of other measures that need to be done. You'll note when I looked and decomposed it, there's no one measure that will come close to hitting 5 by 2030. That's why one needs to do multiple measures, reducing costs, increasing greenfield supply. That also leads to more competition and across people who own land. They can no longer sit back and crank up the price, because someone else will develop their land first and benefit from it. So it provides more competitive tension, more need and incentive to pass through any cost savings that one gets from productivity improvement in houses, which is another area that we should be focusing on. It also relates so building on that, we do have large houses being built across the country, and in Auckland the average house that is built is just shy of 200 metres squared, and it's well known that that's a part of the reason why it's difficult to build cheaper houses by and large.
I guess just one follow-up question. I mean, I guess when I see the scale of production that's occurring in places like Millwater, for instance, where now there's just terrace after terrace going up, the building or the construction costs and certainly the price of land must be on a scale that price should be, one would have thought, considerably lower than what it is. And it would seem to me that there's an insatiable demand now even for that type of building and that type of lifestyle, if you like, that is not going to reverse.
To the chair, can I just clarify the question? You're suggesting that there's a trend towards more townhouses and the like, and that will continue in the future?
Yeah, well, clearly there's a lot more money to be built out of that sort of development, as indicated by these prices.
So that suggests that the supply issues are key issues, so that demand can be met and the price is then at the market, is then at cost profitably rather than whatever the alternatives are. So that's why it is such a multi-faceted thing, and I think your observations are right, which is why we really need to do this work. You'll note we've only recommended the endorsement of one of the goals of Chris's report, because the other one is a clear subset of that. If we don't change the cost, that ratio just won't be met. So, yeah.
Okay, yep, so we're still just doing questions. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and I will. First of all, I'd really like to take the opportunity to congratulate Chris on this piece of work, because it's very extensive and it's very thorough, and he's looked at many of the drivers of demand and the supply constraints. So I just want to congratulate him on the work that he's done and his team has done. So look, Chris, in terms of the availability, you've talked about the availability of land and around the more inner suburbs. And we know that the unitary plan has enabled huge swathes of land for redevelopment, but there's a difference, isn't there, between enabling it to happen and it actually happening because of a lack of market feasibility. And so we're constrained to a large extent, are we not, by the fact that while we've enabled a lot, we've also constrained a lot, and unless we are prepared to forego things like heritage, volcanic view shafts, and a whole bunch of other things, we are not going to be able to meet the stated goal of the Auckland plan to have 70% of the 400,000 houses that we need over the next 30 years within the MUL. So there's huge constraints there, is not that we've imposed on ourselves in terms of heritage and view shafts and a whole bunch of things that are just not going to enable us to meet that.
To the Chair, there are constraints, and I don't want to endorse running roughshod over them, because a lot of them are valid, important things about how we manage heritage, community, environment, infrastructure, and you're absolutely right that if we constrain some areas too much and hope that all the development will go elsewhere, we don't build them, so that may not be, the uptake might be, surprisingly low. We've got to get that balance right, and my case has been to challenge, or at least primarily to highlight the trade-offs of some of those constraints that we do place in the suburbs and their key transport corridors and their key town centres, so that at least if to some extent they are to be sustained, those constraints, that they're done so knowing what the broader trade-offs are, not only to the locality but to these very big picture, high-level 5 by 2030. Housing prices and the effects on the national economy. So you're absolutely right. Those trade-offs are key, and I hope that I can help inform those trade-offs.
Madam Chair, I'd like to speak to this item later on as well.
Okay. Remembering, there's a whole heap of work out ahead of us, so this is certainly not, we're not going to get down to that. You wish to add something, Councillor Fletcher?
No, I was just complimenting the Chief Economist for this very refreshing document.
That's very kind. Councillor and I.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, congratulations, well done, trying to achieve the impossible dream. I've said from day one, and I'll continue to say affordable housing in Auckland is an impossibility. Until such time we approve the expansion of the boundaries, oversupply the land, and get the developers to take the risk of oversupply, then the price will find its own market. And that's the only way you will ever get to that level. At this point of time, it's impossible. Now, my really concern, Madam Chair, as a fact is the renting situation, where the price is now at 700,000, 800,000, and by the end of this year, it'll be $500 for the average three-bedroom house to rent. And if you're in the business, that doesn't pay the mortgage. And so the situation we're getting now is doubling up and tripling up of families and houses to try and survive, or the governments have to dig deeper into accommodation supplements to meet the problem. And so how do we overcome some of that problem is we need to be more simpler in our applications of approvals for the consenting, for people who are in the business to be able to build high-rise apartments for rentals for these people. And the situation is not going to change. And I hear it daily coming in from various sources. They are still frustrated with the consenting process of getting these things through. Only yesterday, the Big John Sachs development in Mangere, I heard someone was saying that's being held up with some of the consenting problems out there. The question I wanted to ask was your 5-to-1 ratio and how that's structured. At what medium level of salary is that based on comparison to the whole structure of salaries, and what price range? And I'd like to know how far back did we ever achieve 5-to-1? I know that many years ago I learned in the States, if you're in the rental business, it's a 7-to-1 ratio. And if you can get it below that, you're a winner. If it's above that, you're a loser. And that's how it is now. So what are our problems? Our problem is high prices. The rentals are going to have to go up. We're going to have to double and triple up. Those are situations that are starting to happen. But I do want to know that ratio figure, how you worked it, and how we can get that. At what was the salary level to get the 5-1 ratio? Is it midstream, low, or high?